Underachievers in League One can come in lots of different forms because there's sides like Bolton Wanderers, for instance, who really haven't hit the heights that we expected of them, and plenty of other sides like that in the bottom half. But there's also teams like Leyton Orient, who I feel like they're sitting just above the relegation zone in League One, but I really wouldn't consider them a relegation candidate just because of the control and the territory they've exerted on games that we'll speak about hopefully with Adam Parks from the Lowdown podcast later. But I think with League One this season, what's really intrigued me is it's been a little bit disappointing. I think going into the season, I was expecting the standard of the promotion race to be incredibly high, with so many teams, sort of about 18 teams all jostling for promotion and another 6 to 8 kind of maybe in more of a relegation dogfight. But I think what's happened, although the likes of Burton, Crawley, Shrewsbury, Cambridge, they're all struggling, there have also been sides like Mansfield, like Northampton, like Stevenage, who have maybe performed a little bit better than what might have been expected, and Barnsley as well have performed better than I expected. They're currently 4th, having tipped them 17th. But I think that's a really interesting part of League One this season, where maybe the standards haven't quite been as high in terms of that promotion and playoff race, and I think that's partly because there's a few teams that haven't quite hit the heights that we were hoping. So that's what we're going to discuss on this League One podcast. Yes, welcome along to this League One podcast. Before we get started, please do subscribe to us on YouTube and on Spotify, because that would help us out a lot. But for now, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Charlie Keegan from Central Wigan. Charlie, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start by talking about your side, the Latics. For me, from what I can see with Wigan, there's a challenge whereby you've got elements of control to your game. You've certainly got width, but what you're missing is a little bit of combination play, I guess, in those central areas, and a real threat. And the equilibrium seems to be a little bit off kilter at the moment.
Yeah, well, your intro there talking about underachievers in the league. I knew you were talking about us, Gav. It's exactly how it's going this season. But I think you're right. I think when you actually look at our defensive stats, only 12 goals conceded. And like we were speaking about on the last podcast, when we went in between the international breaks with those 6 games without conceding a goal, like we looked very good defensively. And I think we have as well in the games that we've lost or conceded in. I think overall we've actually not looked that bad. But yeah, it's that final third, getting it right in the midfield and getting the link up top. But, when you lose so much experience in your squad, we're going to struggle. And the youngsters at the moment just haven't quite hit the ground running.
Yeah, not quite yet. I suppose what I'm wondering, Charlie, is if I look at this Wigan squad, it seems like you've got this challenge whereby you've got the wingers. I think we talked about it last time you're on the podcast. You've got the wingers that are very wide. And I think, to be fair, like Sorba Thomas in that 1-0 defeat to Wickham, Sorba Thomas actually was able to create a little bit from that sort of wide left position. But I'm still feeling like, is 3-4-2-1 with a box midfield going to be the way to go, and the way that you kind of breach this lack of kind of link in central areas? Because you played Tello Asgard as a false 9, or started him as a false 9 before Dale Taylor came on at half-time in the last league game. And I don't know, I just feel like you're missing a little bit more in those central areas.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the game at the DW watching that when Tello Asgard started at the false 9 position, and I'll tell you, it did not work at all. I've said it about Asgard for a while, and I said it about Wilkin before him. They are far too nice to play in that role. They're fine as an attacking midfielder as a 10. They're just not a number 9, and that's no slight on them. It's just not their strength. And you can tell when Dale Taylor came on, he actually got up close to the centre backs and really worked them, and that just gave Asgard a little bit of space, allowed Francois to get in behind, and we looked much better in the second half. But yeah, playing Tello up top didn't work. But I think you're right, maybe just a change in formation. I like the idea of a 3-4-2-1. I think that would actually support Dale Taylor a little bit more. Maybe if Joe Hugo's starting, it would support him a little more, give him less of a burden. And in that Wickham game, we actually took, I forget who was playing at right back. Maybe it was Calvin Ramsey was on at the time.
Oh, it was it was Toby Sibic, I think, who played at right back.
Toby Sibic, yeah, you're right. It's Toby Sibic. And then we brought on Dion Rankin, actually, who played at at right back. So, and obviously he did it for Exeter as a right wing back. So I think if we are going to maybe change to a 3-4-2-1, you could have Paul Dummett as the third centre back on the left if you really wanted to. I think Rankin can play that on the side, and I'm pretty sure Ola Kigbe as well can play the left side. So it wouldn't actually be a bad formation to go with. But ultimately, something's got to change because it's not been good enough going forward.
Yeah, I suppose one thing that's really stood out to me, Charlie, is that Sean Maloney has come in for so much credit for Wigan Athletic fans because of I think people have said he's almost saved the club with the work that he's done, coming in at such a difficult time, the work that he's done with the academy, the relationship he's got with Bruce Rioch. Lots of it, in lots of ways, he's been the fantastic custodian for Wigan Athletic Football Club, and I think it's really important that we do honour that. At the same, how do you kind of square that with the fact that the first third of this season, Charlie, hasn't gone in the direction that I think a lot of ticks would have maybe hoped?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. There's a lot of layers to this, and a lot of it does actually stem from the ownership and the kind of cost cutting that they've wanted to do. There's actually an article come out today, an interview with Stephen Humphreys, and he's talking about how he got a contract offer last season at the point where he was our top scorer, and he got a contract offer in the December, but he said that the wages on offer were actually what you would expect for a League Two top end competing side, and not for some team that wants to try and get into the Championship and try and push up the League One. So ultimately, he wasn't going to accept that, and it's kind of, I don't think our ownership ever went forward with it. I know Maloney was trying really hard. Even Humphreys was saying, I had conversations with Maloney every day. He said that he was talking about the contract, and at the end he had to say, there isn't one there for you. So he ended up leaving and going to Barnsley, and we're seeing how well he's done. But I think it's a big reminder, and well, not a reminder because they're quite new to it, but a big opening of the eyes to the owners that if you want to kind of make money in this league and achieve success, you've kind of got to spend a bit of money as well on the experienced players. You can't just rely on a very young squad. Well, it was a young squad anyway to start with. And then you just added a lot more youth and a lot more inexperience and untold talent trying to hope that they can try and kick it up. And very rare occasions that might work, that might happen. But Humphreys also said that the same was with Jordan Jones and Josh McGuinness and Charlie White. The contract offers just were not there to entice them to stay. And I wonder if in January we are going to try and make some strides to try and get somebody who's experienced in and help us in that second half.
Yeah, do you think there's a challenge for last time you were on the podcast, Charlie, you spoke about the strategic direction of the club is entwined with the strategic direction of Wigan Warriors, is it? The rugby team. So essentially you've got somebody who's in charge of both, when really you'd kind of want somebody who's more of a football specialist. I suppose you could argue that, did I say Bruce Rioch earlier? It's Gregor Rioch, isn't it?
Yeah, Gregor.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Gregor. Getting my Riochs mixed up there. So yeah, I suppose... Yeah, is the club in a place where there are people there that can make decisions like bringing in a bit more experience, a centre forward, maybe a midfielder who have got that bit of nous and savvy?
Yeah, well, I think Gregor Rioch, like, he is a football man. He ran our academy for a long time. A lot of the talents that have come through it, like Alfie Devine and Jensen Way, who obviously is now back with us, and Joe Gellart, they were all under Rioch's academy. And Rioch's academy also saved us throughout the administration and built up a lot of the talents. Talo Asgard came from it as well, alongside like Luke Robinson and Sam Tickle, Charlie Hughes. So Gregor knows what he's doing. I'm pretty sure I've got a lot of trust in Gregor Rioch. The problem, I think, is, well, not, yeah, I would say problem. Mike Danson owns both of them. And then you've got Ben Goodburn, who is the CEO of the rugby, but also is the chairman and interim CEO of the football. And I think for the start of the season, I understood what they were doing when they first took over because of the mess that Phoenix had left us in. I think Mike Danson and Ben Goodburn wanted to keep the team really small so they can try and clear the debts as much as they can and try and build a structure with a small team so there's less people to go through. I think now it's really starting to catch up with us where the season is 30% of the way through. We haven't performed anywhere near the level we needed to. And the kind of cost cutting has really come back to bite us now because we haven't invested well enough in the squad to put us in a competitive situation. And now we're 1 point above the drop zone. Yes, we've got games in hand, but there's starting to become a bit of a worry of they sent out letters to fans when we got season tickets and things talking about aspirations of the Premier League. Put them aspirations a decade away because we're not going to do that if we're trying to cost cut. So hopefully over the next year or so, maybe 6 months, I really, really, really want to see a footballing CEO placed there that can work directly with Gregor who can then go to Mike Danson and say, we need X amount to get this player and it will do this for us. And it's got to be as simple as that.
Yeah, you need people who understand money, you need people who understand football, and ideally someone who's got a bit of a foot in both camps, because that's where you make the best decisions. But as much as we're talking about the problems at Wigan Athletic, I've got to look at the 11 here, and you've got Sam Tickle, who's one of the most exciting young goalkeepers in the country. You've got Will Aimson, who's a quality centre half. I think you've seen it this season. You've got Asgard, who's a brilliant sort of Norwegian talent, who's now got a few years of experience under his belt. We've got Sorba Thomas, who's played well in the Championship before, and I think we've seen he can do some damage. You've got Matt Smith at the base of midfield as a bit of a quarterback. Francois, I think, is a really talented left-footed midfielder as well. So that's sort of 6 or 7 players there that I think are the base of a good 11. And I'm just wondering if you can sort of find the right formula, add 2 or 3 players in January. I feel like you're not a million miles off being a kind of top 10 side at this level. Maybe it's just a case of 1 or 2 subtle tweaks, and that could make all the difference.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I really do not think we're far off. Yeah, it's not been great at the start of this season, but I know we spoke about last time that, but obviously you're a Birmingham City fan, and I think maybe you'll even concede that Wigan actually played really well in that game, and it was ultimately one ball that fell at the back for, was it Scott Wright? Who scored the winner. So 90th minute, I think they were going to score anyway, if I'm honest. Their attack was relentless, but it's like little fine margins that have just dropped us a lot of points. And then going up 2-0 against Blackpool, I thought we were excellent in that first half. And then 2 unfortunate own goals have cost us. And in the Wycombe game, we should have won that game, no problem. But Franco Ravizoli put in one of the best goalkeeper performances I've seen in a long time to keep us out. So yeah, we're not actually far off. And I do think maybe if we'd have kept Stephen Humphreys, I think we'd be in a much better position just by having him by himself. If everybody else had gone, or Jordan Jones, I think if we'd have managed to keep him, I do think we'd be way higher up the table. So defensively, that's where a lot of our experience is, and a lot of our big, huge talent like Sam Tickle. If that defense does get breached, you've got Sam Tickle who is saving us a lot of the time. So I think 7 clean sheets so far this season. So yeah, I think I'm not worrying at this stage. I would just like to see somebody experienced, get them up top, and just see what we can do from there.
Yeah, I was speaking to a Barnsley fan earlier called Joe Townsend from a TikTok, and he was sort of waxing lyrical about the impact Stephen Humphrey has made. So sort of feel a bit like we're going to need a centre forward. Why?
I wonder if we can get him on loan for the next game, because we play Barnsley the next one. Just give him a Wigan shirt.
Yeah, you've scouted him when he was playing for Wigan Athletic, didn't you? What are we looking at in January? You've talked about the attack. You've obviously got a good number 10. You've got. Do you know when Luke Chambers returns from injury? Is that New Year?
They just said he's out for a long time, but they didn't say he's out for the season. So I'm holding on to hope that he can be back in the second half of the season. I don't think it'll be any time before January, if February. But if he can be back for the latter stage, we'll have Paul Dummett, who he might be here. He's only here till January, but he might be extending. We've also got Luke Robinson, who's getting up to speed. Sessegnon can play both sides, but Chambers is one of the best left backs in the league, I think. And I think, I'm very surprised he didn't go in the Championship this year.
Yeah, well, hopefully Chambers can have a good final third of the season, but sadly, it sounds like that's kind of the best that you can hope for.
Yeah.
Delighted to be joined now by Adam Parks from the Lowdown podcast of Leyton Orient. Good evening, Adam. How are you?
I'm good, Gab. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks. Really appreciate you joining this evening, mate. I look at Leyton Orient, and I've felt this all season. I think you're only 2 or 3 players away from being a top 10 side, mate. And I know how strange that sounds for a side that's 20th in the league, and I don't know whether the Orient fan base would kind of share my confidence in your team even, but that's kind of how I feel looking at you. I think you've got some brilliant players, especially down that left side.
Wow, the tables have turned from last season. I was the one that was happy clappy, and you were the one trying to rein me back in. Yes, I agree. been a lot better recently. We've started to score goals. There's a few players that are starting to step up. But when those three players that we're missing are Theo Archibald, a fit Jordan Graham, and Idris El Mazouni at Oxford, they're very big holes to fill. And I don't believe we'll probably have the budget to fill one of those holes. Obviously, Theo's now out for the rest of the season. He's not played a game yet. So that's, one player we've never had. Jordan Graham is trying to get back to fitness, and Idris El Mazouni is playing for Morocco and smashing up the championship.
What's the crack with Jordan Bryan at the moment, Paxi? Because I feel like Darren Pratley did really well, I think, against Blackpool a couple of weeks ago. But I at the same time, I wonder, a younger version of Darren Pratley would be ideal. Is Jordan Bryan injured at the moment?
Jordan Brown's had a very bad season.
Really?
And I know that I'm his biggest fan, but I'm also very realistic. There's a lot of players in our midfield that looked a lot better with Idris El Mazouni playing with them. Right. I do think it's down to confidence. Obviously, when you're playing a team that's lost the first 4 games, there's mistakes happening. It takes a while to bounce back. But I'm sure he'll come again, and I'm confident in the lad's ability because he was brilliant last year, even with Idris. So, Jordan Brown is someone we hope will step back up again. But you're right, Darren Pratley's probably been our best player in that position this year, and he's only played a handful of games.
Yeah, I'm slightly worried that I still kind of hope that Jordan Brown can reclaim last season's levels, because I now feel you have got that ball-playing midfielder to sit alongside him, ironically, now in Lewis Warrington, I suppose. And I feel as if Darren Pratley, yes, he's done well, but I also feel like you can get torn open a little bit in transitions because he's 39 now, and obviously that limits you in terms of what you're able to do physically. And also, I think in central defence, I think you might have been right about Omar Beckles. I'm not sure he's quite up to League One standard, especially if you're looking to, especially in line with the level of performance of the rest of the side.
Well, Darren Pratley's going to play for another 10 years, so be prepared for that. Omar Beckles has probably turned it around with me, to be honest. Okay. He didn't start the season too well, but he seems to have eradicated some of the problems that I've had with him. Dan Happy started to turn it around as well. Lewis Warrington is a player we haven't seen a lot of. He's at times lightweight on the ball. Yeah, he can pick a pass. But the player that I think's made our midfield better is Dom Ball. Obviously played a lot in the championship. And unfortunately, Sean Clare, who was playing right back at the beginning of the season, then we put him in midfield. Our midfield started to have some shape and some structure to it. And then he got injured as well. So it's not going to be a question every time I answer it that's going to have something to do with injuries in it. But you can't keep having players perform in positions and then they disappear. You get no structure, you get no consistency in performance. But I touched on this with Matt at the Stevenage fan podcast. It was, we're not getting any goals in midfield, which is our problem. I think our defenders are outscoring our midfielders this season. I don't particularly think that Charlie Kelman and Dan Adji are doing badly, and Sonny Perkins is turning a corner, and I've been very critical of that young man, but he's played pretty well in the last few games. And we've got a cup run. It's hopefully we'll get through that. But going back to your original question or statement, I've got no problems with where Orient are. You look at the way the table is looking, you have to look for 4 teams that are worse than you. If you look at some of the teams...
you're nowhere near the bottom 4. Yeah,
no,
you're much better
but I said this to Matt last night. Saturday's game at Stevenage is big because them being on 18 and us being on 14 points, I think we're in better form than they are. I think we're probably better than they are this year, and we've got a better manager than they have this year. But when you look at the bottom of the table, you've got teams like Rotherham, Wigan, kind of Charlton because they're only 13th. Peterborough in 12th and not unattainable from the teams down near the bottom. Some of them bigger clubs or more experienced clubs at the level will start to break away from that bottom 4. And I don't think someone like Gareth Ainsborough is going to really turn around Shrewsbury that quickly. Great manager, but I don't think that will happen. So there's teams like Burton and Shrewsbury that are pretty much written off already in my eyes. Cambridge started to pull some points out of the bag from nowhere. And Crawley, you never know what you're going to get with them. So it's... I think we'll end up 16th. I generally don't think it's going to be massive. I don't think we got a budget for January, so I don't see there being mass turnover or even a couple of players in. But I've been wrong before. I think last year was our opportunity to get as high up the table as we did. And I think we probably missed an opportunity last year. Looking at the quality of this year and how tight the league is, I can't see us getting top 6. But would I be surprised if we got 11th again? No. But again, 16th is what I said at the beginning of the season. With the strength of the league on paper at the beginning of the season, I've got no problem with that. I do think there will be a big gap between the relegation zone and potentially the rest of the league. So I think we're in the bottom 8, but I think we're at the top of the bottom 8.
Charlie, Parksy mentioned Sean Clare earlier. Obviously, somebody you're familiar with his time at Wigan. Do you see him when he does get back fit for the O's that he can make a contribution to their midfield?
I do, yeah, and I think he's a really versatile kind of player. Obviously played right back for us a lot of the time, played at right centre-back, also stepped into the midfield. We sometimes saw him out at left midfield if he went a bit of a venture, and he assisted a really nice Marshall Godo goal, I think he did. So, yeah, I really like Sean Clare, and I think he offers a lot to the teams, and I think he's 27 or 28 now, so he's got that experienced head. But I think when you look at where Leyton Orient have come from, obviously, in the 2017-18 season, you were down in the National League and you've managed to climb all the way through. I think it can sometimes take teams a long time to establish themselves as a bit of a solid third-tier team. I don't think Leyton Orient have that problem. I think they already are an established third-tier team. So obviously you've got Charlie Kelman as well, who I quite enjoyed when he was on loan with us at Wigan, and you've got Tom James, who was influential for us during a stint with us. So I think, the team's really good. Just one thing I noticed, though, is shots for and on target for, you're quite low in the league. And Charlie Kelman is obviously at the heart of a lot of it. But defensively, only Birmingham and Huddersfield have faced less shots on target than Leyton Orient. So defensively, by the stats, you look solid defensively, but just in the attacking phase, like Gavin, me were talking about before with Wigan, we've got that bit of a disconnect. A Leyton Orient suffering the same kind of thing where you're actually quite solid. It's just moving forward and getting dangerous in the final third.
Same point this season as last season. We were 5 points off of where we were. We had 19 points. We're on 14 this year. Yep. But we scored 14 goals and we conceded 18 goals last season after 14 games. This year, we've scored 14 goals and conceded 18 goals.
Right.
Our problem this season has been that we've had games against, especially Birmingham, Bolton, a couple of other games where we've lost points through goalkeeping errors at the beginning of the season, and we could probably be looking at around 21, 22 points at the moment with a depleted squad. We haven't been playing forward quick enough. We haven't been very direct. We've lost a lot of that. So in terms of getting into the box and being attacking with purpose, we haven't had that. In the last few games, there seems to have been a tactical tweak. And Richie Wellens has got to have a lot of credit for that, where it seems like we're playing more of a 2 up front or a rotated 3, and Sonny Perkins is getting deeper, and Charlie Kelman or Adji. It's been Adji in the recent games that has really kind of pushed on and been quite loose up there and causing a lot of mayhem. So I think there may have been a little bit of a hangover from the year before. We've lost some really good players. Some people were injured. It's taken a while for some of these new players to gel. Dare I say, even though I kind of dismissed him earlier, Lewis Warrington, he looked okay against Blackpool. If we play like we did against Blackpool against Stevenage on Saturday, we'll beat them 5-0. That's not exaggeration. That's just...
But Stevenage have got a good defense. They've got Carl Pejani at the back, mate.
Injured, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You know what I say about them.
You've done your research. I'm impressed.
but my research is also that they had 23 points at this point in the season. They've got 18, but they've only scored 11 and conceded 16. So, the defence is fine, but they're not scoring goals. So what do you want against Leyton Orient? You want to push them back. And if they're not threatening and not going to score goals, then that's going to just play into our hands. And we could even play counter attack against them if they're not dangerous. And with the pace up front, we should rip them apart. It's one of those games with Huddersfield on Tuesday and Oldham in a cup on Saturday. This week could be quite huge. If you push me about would I have a draw on Saturday, yes, because I don't want to lose any distance between us and Stevenage per se. I don't want teams getting away from us. But if you're going to say between Stevenage and Huddersfield, which game we're going to win, I'm going to say we're going to win the Stevenage game. So, we've got a good defence. Just exactly what Charlie just said. Like, there's a reason why teams are not getting shots on target against us. But there was a reason at the beginning of the season where we were dropping points because, our goalkeeper, unfortunately, was flapping at crosses or letting balls go through him and going into the net. And that is a worries me because I'm sure there's other clubs in the division that's happened to. But I tell you what, if you compare the first 5 games this season on difficulty that we had, and then you look at the mistakes that we had in them games and the possession and the performances we had, we shouldn't have lost to Birmingham. We shouldn't have lost the first game of the season against Bolton. We shouldn't have lost at Charlton, and we didn't play very well there. We should have done. And they did their old, let's walk up to our cop end and think we won the league again after a 1-0 win in the last minute. Orient are a good side, Gab. So in the long way, for 10 minutes, Orient are a good side because they've got a good manager and they've got good culture. But you're right. There's 2 or 3 players that are missing that's making us a top 10 team. And I don't see us being able to get them. And now Theo Archibald's out for the season because he was going to be like a January signing for us. That's one player we've not got. So how that affects the budget, if there's any way they can manipulate the budget to make that look like we can get another player in, or whether we can send 1 or 2 of the loan signings back, because I can't see Zach Hemming staying now that he's number 2 to Joshua Keeley, who's been excellent. And I can't really see Jamie Donnelly, who's supposed to be the next Harry Kane, staying now that Sonny Perkins has started to...
Or if he struggles at Leyton Orient, he might be the next Harry Kane.
Harry Kane scored 5 goals in 19 games for Leyton Orient while he assisted a couple as well. So he's done a lot more than what Jamie Donnelly did, even though at the time everyone thought Tom Carroll was the best player of the 3.
Sure.
With John Paul and Poco. So unfortunately, and this is where I think, and this is a different conversation, so I'll be very, very brief with this point. Where football has now gone to with academy graduates, they go to League 1 and League 2. They used to be able to come down and show that they were miles above. And there are some players like Louis Barry that comes in at the level and they are miles ahead. But some come in and they're like, well, what am I doing here? Because I haven't got 10 minutes on the ball to pick a pass and make myself look good when I'm playing under 21 or under 23s. That's kind of where I feel with Jamie Donnelly. For someone who was supposed to come in and light us up, he's not done that. Whereas someone like Zekabirio, who's can't even get in the squad now after an amazing start to the season, he did exactly that.
Absolutely. I think just coming back to your point there, Adam, Orient do frustrate me in the sense that I feel like you're so close to being a really good side at this level, but I still think you're 3 or 4 players away. Goalkeeping area you've talked about has been a challenge. Yeah, I feel like you're very close, but I also feel like there's not going to be the resources for you to realistically get to that complete 11. It's always going to be a little bit of a scratch in certain areas. So where was I? But one thing that does kind of quite excite me is the impact of Dan Ajay, because I know when Charlie Kelman has started for much of the season, he hasn't really given me much of a physical focal point. Whereas what I really like about Ajay is that he just bulldozes, in those channels when Blackpool's right centre half went walkabouts, he absolutely bulldozed against Ollie Casey, and it created something for Kelman for one of the goals. It created something for Perkins at the back stick. Ajay's physicality and ability to get into really good positions, slightly out wide, just opens the game up for you in terms of creating chances.
He was man of the match against Blackpool by far and away, and Jack Curry got it. But then I'm going to bring up Jack Curry in terms of that Curry, as well. Jack Curry has created havoc on our left side because he's good defensively, but he's really good going forward until he gets in the last 18 yards. So having a left back, and I've been very critical of Jaden Sweeney about going forward, when you've got a left back that can go forward and be impactful in the final third by crossing or by being in the right areas at the right time, you create space for your front men and your midfielders. And Jack Curry's been massively impactful in that way. Yeah, Danajai has been different in the last 5-6 games. The first beginning of the season, he wasn't too good. I would have said Charlie Kelman was excellent in the first few games, but he is. Like I said to Matt last night, we've got 4 centre backs. Maybe 3 of those 4 would get into most teams in League One. That's where our budget's gone. But there wouldn't be many centre backs in a division that would like to play against Danajai because he is quick. He's good with his feet. He's a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah,
and
he's so strong, isn't he? Yeah,
and that for any League One team and League Two team is indispensable. You can't. You have to have that player, and we've got it. So, do I think that him and Kelman can hit 15 goals each? I do. I honestly do. I think they'll get for the season at least 50, including cup competition.
But you're not going to always. How do you fit? Do you play Kelman slightly wider? That's the challenge because you got to play.
Well, it's a new system that Wellens is playing, or at least it's a tweak where it seems like we're playing 2 up top all the time, but we've got a front 3. So, like, if we've got at least this is how I'm seeing it. I'm just a layman, but you've got your back 4. And then you've got, obviously, your overlapping fullbacks if they're getting forward, which then, kind of balances out. But then the midfield is a 3, which then is a 3 up front. But it kind of, again, it becomes a 4-4-2 with an overlap. So,
but it's definitely lopsided towards the left, isn't it? Where that feels like the real strong point of this.
I think once Jordan Graham if he can get fit, and I said this on a pod a few weeks ago, is that Jordan Graham is nearly 30 and he's played 150 professional football games. And that's not particularly telling me that he's going to play more than 15 to 20 games a season.
Yeah.
So if he's not playing 15 to 20 games a season, he's not going to be fit for those 15 to 20 games a season. He might be fit for 5 of those once he's up to speed and then he's injured again. Yeah. So I think if you were going to push me on 2 positions where I feel like we need a player, I would say that we potentially need a centre midfielder and a right winger, or at least a player that can play on the right hand side of a 3-man attack.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can find those final pieces of the jigsaw. Listen, Pax, it's been great to have you on. Orient clearly on the right track, and hopefully that will soon manifest itself in results.
No worries, and that's all. It's all about law of the universe, right? You got to manifest these results. So 5-0 Orient on Saturday. There you go.
We had it here first. Cheers, Paxi. All the best, mate.
See you later.
See you later.
Delighted to be joined now by Ollie from the Gascast podcast. Ollie, thanks so much for joining us. Just checking you. I can't actually see you, so can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm not sure what's going on there. Bear with me 2 seconds.
There we go.
Hello.
Great to have you on, Ollie. Thanks so much for it's Neno. I've always thought of you known you as Neno, so I'm slightly confused.
Well, yeah, a lot of people call me Nino. It's what I call myself on our podcast as well, to be fair, but I've just decided to mix it up for no reason, really. Yeah.
Okay, right.
Call me either. Whatever you're comfortable with, Gab, I'm happy.
Well, great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. I watched the extended highlights of the Crawley game, and obviously the first half you think, wow, this is incredible. You're winning your first contact. Belongo's flying forward. You've got Hutchinson released. McCormick's getting on the end of crosses. Shaq Ford with that combination play with Mola, and it looks pretty strong. And then it feels like in the second half, everything that you did so well in the first half just kind of completely went out of the window. So to what extent do you take some of that encouragement from the first half performance against the poor Crawley side, balanced with the disappointment that you weren't able to sustain it in the way that you would have liked?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was such a weird game. First half, I think most Rovers fans would agree with me that it was probably one of our most encouraging 45 minutes of the season to date, because we're not a side that creates a lot of chances in general. But in that first 45 minutes against Crawley, probably unlucky not to score 3, maybe 4, if I'm being greedy. We hit the bar a couple of times, and we had a couple of one-on-ones that their keeper, I think his name's Truman, the Crawley keeper, did really well to save. So, yeah, we could have easily been 2-3-0 up, and that would have been a fair reflection of our dominance in that first half, I would say. And Crawley didn't have a shot on target themselves in the first 45 minutes. So it really was quite a comfortable first half for us, just missing that goal. The second half, then, I can't even begin to describe how unrecognisable that Rovers side was that played in the second half, in terms of the dominance that we had in the first half just completely vanished. We barely got on the ball in the second half. I think second half possession, Crawley had about 71%, I think I'm right in saying.
Jesus.
Which, when you're at home to us, no disrespect to Crawley, but when you're at home to a side who are in the bottom 4, I know they are that type of team where they want to have the ball and play out from the back and what have you, and they are comfortable with the ball.
Yeah.
But it turned the home crowd pretty restless, to be honest, because we were pinned in our own half for large parts of that second half. I do have to give props to Crawley because they played some of the best football I've seen at the Mem in a long time. So I think it's always important to remember.
Sorry, Ibrahim at the centre half for Crawley looks pretty tidy on the ball, the number 23, doesn't he?
Yeah. Is that Kamara or is that a different player?
I think it might be Ibrahim, but I'm not sure. But so maybe Kamara was impressive as well.
I think they had another player in sort of playing in midfield / on the wing called Kamara, who just ran the show in the second half.
Yeah.
But yeah, Crawley absolutely dominated us, outclassed us. They were putting together some lovely sort of one-touch passing moves, cutting through us at times. In fairness, they didn't create a lot. I think that's Crawley's issue, is that although between the boxes they're very good, I don't think they quite have that quality at the top end of the pitch to kind of make the most of that, thankfully for us. Otherwise, they would have seen us off in that second half. But yeah, it ended up having felt quite encouraged at half time. I kind of walked out of that ground feeling pretty demoralised, to be honest. And I think a lot of Rovers fans did, because although we kind of did expect Crawley to come into it in the second half, the way that they just played us off the pitch in our home ground was demoralising. There's no other word for it, really.
Yeah. Sorry, just to correct you, Ibrahim actually played in midfield. I thought he'd carried it out. Anyway.
Okay.
But that Kamara, was a forward number 12. And he's actually someone I've liked for a while because he's a very energetic player that just never stops running. So I can see that he brought that. I suppose on the subject of energy, what I'm kind of curious about with Bristol Rovers, Ollie, is you obviously had Chris Martin starting, who's kind of coming towards the end of his career. So maybe there's a sustainability question mark for him in terms of whether he can play more than one half of football in terms of the work against the ball. But then you also brought on Scott Sinclair for Isaac Hutchinson. And I was really surprised by that substitution because Hutchinson, for me, is a really exciting, vibrant, creative player. And whereas Sinclair is right at the end of his career, and I'm not sure I would really be as scared about facing him if I was an opponent.
Yeah, you're not alone in being surprised by that substitution. I think everyone was scratching their heads in the ground, to be honest. It was quite early on as well. I think I'm right in saying it was about the 56th, 57th minute he brought off Hutchinson. And Hutchinson is one of the players who hit the bar in the first half and went through one-on-one and had his effort saved. So he was a real threat to their goal. Sinclair came on. Sinclair actually had probably, to be fair, had the best chance in the second. Although I kind of slated how badly we played in the second half, and we did, we actually had the best chance where Chris Martin played Sinclair through one-on-one, and he just blazed it over the bar. I think it ended up down Gloucester Road somewhere, but it was a terrible finish. But Sinclair is someone who, in all honesty, I don't really want to see playing that much this season, because I think all of us would rather see us invest more play time into the likes of Shaq Ford, Hutchinson, Luke McCormick, the kind of younger up-and-coming attacking players that we've got. As for Chris Martin, I mean, I feel like a bit of an idiot when I say this, because he scored 16 goals for us last season, and we were a pretty bang average League One side last season. So it's a very good goal return. However, I just don't think, like in the first half against Crawley, we tried to be quite front-footed on the press when they had the ball, and it worked really well, and we were able to win the ball high up the pitch. However, we were doing that with 10 men because Chris Martin is not pressing the opposition. You know, everyone's doing that around him because he doesn't have the legs to do it and sustain that. I think that's probably partly played into why we weren't able to do that to Crawley in the second half, because if you're doing that with 10 men for 45 minutes, it's just not sustainable to do that for another 45 minutes. So he offers very little without the ball. And then even when we do have the ball, unless the ball is played directly into him, he's not running any channels. He's not going to, get hold of it unless the service is into his feet or into his chest. And what he really needs is to be in the box, get crosses into him and first time finishes, get his head on stuff. And that's just not really the type of side we are. So, yeah, he's doing a job because we don't really have any other fully fit strikers at the minute. But his usefulness, if that's a word, to us this season is fairly limited, I would say.
Charlie, Wigan Athletic won 4-0 at Bristol Rovers earlier in the season. I don't know if you were able to see that game in some form, but if you were, how would you kind of diagnose the challenges that Bristol Rovers had that day, or otherwise, what have you made of them generally this season?
Well, on the run-up, I was doing another podcast with a couple of Bristol Rovers fans, and I joked and I said, we're going to win 4-1. I said, I'm sure of it. And it was because Griffiths was facing so many shots, and I thought defensively, it just looked all over the place. And I thought, if we are going to batter a team, it's going to be Bristol Rovers this weekend, and we got the 4. And I wouldn't say that now. I'd be completely the opposite. I'd be actually going, I think now that Omacheri and Shaq Ford and Raul Sotirio have kind of grown into the season, I think they'd give us a really, really good game. I think we just played them at a really good time. So for me, that's just an anomaly of the game. And obviously in that game, I know your centre-back got sent off. I can't remember his name. Was it Moore or Taylor got sent off?
Taylor Moore,
And that to me, that sending off, obviously it was nothing to do with an in-game issue. It was just he'd lost his head. And I think it just signalled a lot of frustration around that time. There was a lot of talk about Matt Taylor. Is he the right guy? How long's he got left? But I look at the squad now and I think, actually, Shaq Ford, he really impressed me when he was at Orient last year. I thought he was excellent. Sotirio has really impressed me as well. So I think there is a good group there of players. But the one thing that still worries me is just the amount of shots that you face him. I think Griffiths has had to make the most saves in the league. I think you face the most shots on target in the league. Yeah. Is that more weighted towards the start of the season, or has it just been kind of a consistent throughout?
I'd say it's been, it's a good question. I'd say it's been fairly consistent throughout, to be honest with you. We've not shipped as many goals in the last few games. However, he is still busy. He's still making saves. It's just that maybe the strikers haven't been as clinical against us in the last few. But yeah, no, he is still very busy. To be honest, we're just a really odd team this season. We're not particularly great going forwards. We're not scoring a lot of goals. As I said, we're not actually conceding a lot of goals at the minute. And I think we're kind of 6th or 7th the amount of clean sheets we've kept. But Griffiths is so busy in almost every game, which doesn't really say a lot for us defensively in our structure and organisation and what have you. It is a worry. I'm concerned about us at both ends of the pitch. And what you say about the pressure on Matt Taylor, that is definitely still there. I think there's large parts of our fan base who would quite happily see us change the manager now. There's a really weird feeling around the club that it almost fluctuates every game. If we get a bad result, suddenly it's, the next game is a must win or Taylor has to go. And then he might scab a win against someone, and then there's a reprieve for one game, but then we lose the next one, and we're just in this ever evolving, repeating cycle, basically, of this narrative going on, and it's a bit tiring, to be fair. But yeah, he is a very busy man, Josh Griffiths. He's earning his wage, I would say.
And I just want to ask about. Oh, sorry, Gab. I just want to ask about Luke Thomas. For me, he's one of the best creators in the team, obviously coming off that right side and he can get forward. He can also sit back, although I don't like him so much when he does sit back. I think he's better in the attacking phases. Is he not been being played or picked as much as he probably should do? Because I think when you look at the stats, I know key passes can kind of throw a few people off, but I think he's over double what anybody else has put on. But the last few games I've watched and looked at the team sheet, he's not been there. So is that something that's a concern, or is it a fitness issue, or what's that about?
Yeah, he started the season playing fairly regularly. We then had a Bristol Street Motors Trophy game away at Swindon a couple of months back, and we lost 4-0. And after that game, Taylor came out and said, basically, there's a few players in that side tonight who have kind of lost my trust, and you won't be seeing much of them again. And since then, Thomas basically hasn't played. I think he might have come on for a cameo appearance once against Weston-super-Mare in the FA Cup or something like that. But yeah, since then, we've barely seen him. I wouldn't be overly surprised if we see him loaned out in January, potentially. I wouldn't say that would be a popular decision with a lot of the fans because, like you say, I think he's one of our, on his day, I think he's one of our most...
He's better than Sinclair, Ollie, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. I'd sooner see him start over Sinclair any day of the week. But
he can start for Wigan if he wants. He can come over to us in January. We'll look after him. He'll help us.
But yeah, I really like Luke Thomas. He's got loads of pace. He can beat a man. I think he's frustratingly, though, he is one of those players who often looks more dangerous than he actually is, if that makes sense. I think he looks like he's going to be a real threat to you, but actually when he gets in the positions to take a chance and score a goal or play a sort of pass that slides a striker in or something, it's often not quite on the money, to be honest with you. In terms of his sort of goal and assist numbers, I mean, they weren't bad last season, but they also weren't exceptional. You know, I wouldn't say he's a player that would kind of get into a top 6, 7 League One side. Not that that's what we are in all.
Sorry, I think you've muted yourself. So I think you need to unmute yourself, Ollie.
They're on a mime.
I'm having a mare. There we go. Yeah, I think we would all like to see him playing more than he is, but it sounds like there's a bit of an attitude / falling out with the manager situation that's happened, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And what about longevity down the years? I know obviously Bristol have struggled slightly, becoming like a really top mid-table side in League One, and obviously that's where you're hopefully going to get to. What's it like academy-wise? Like obviously with Wigan and other academies, I like watching the under-21s and the Euros and stuff. So I know you've got a young Kofi Shaw, I think, is coming through, and maybe Micah Anthony. How excited are you for the youngsters that are coming through? And do you think, you know what, in 2 or 3 seasons, we're going to have some really exciting talents in this team?
Yeah, I think fairly optimistic about the sort of younger generation coming through. The most promising one we've got is probably Jed Ward, the goalkeeper, who started about 20 odd games for us last season in the second half.
There's 2 of them.
Yeah, he's out on loan at the minute. I think it's Forest Green, I'm right in saying, and he's playing regularly there, and he's getting rave reviews there as well. He's only 19, 20, local lad, so I'm really excited about him. I think he will probably be our number 1 next season, I would say, when Griffiths goes back from his loan spell. Kofi Shaw, yeah, again, excited about him. However, he's only kind of 17 or so, and he has also gone out on loan recently. Matt Taylor sort of started to play him in a couple of games and then gave this weird kind of cryptic interview about how basically insinuating that the owners are having an influence in team selection and kind of want him to play some of these young upcoming players to build their value, etc. Because apparently there's already kind of Championship Premier League clubs sniffing around Kofi Shaw. So I can see it from their point of view. But yeah, since then, again, after that Swindon game, it was another case of Taylor going, I'm now going to pick the players that I want to pick and not listen to outside influences, etc. So it was pretty obvious kind of what he was saying. And since then, Kofi has then signed a contract extension, long-term contract extension. So it's good to get him tied down. However, I think I wouldn't be surprised if he went for a fee in the summer, to be honest. I think it's one of those where we've signed him down to get money for him. So yeah, there's not loads of players coming through at the moment that I think I can see in the first team in a couple of years' time, but probably Jed Ward is the main one.
Ollie, just kind of circling back to kind of the big question around Bristol Rovers. I kind of have contrasting feelings on this. One is that I do sometimes look at Bristol Rovers and look at the energy and the intensity that you play with. And I think when Matt Taylor can build a side that kind of matches what he wants from his side, that's really pressing aggressively from the front and putting teams under pressure and maybe going a little bit against the grain in terms of the stylistic trends of football because of that willingness to embrace chaos and play forward early and that side of things, at your best in certain periods, I feel like there's something that I can see there where, I can kind of buy into that. Added to the fact that you are 14th, which is, I think, a reasonable position on paper for Bristol Rovers to be in. There's also part of me on the other side that's looking at it and thinking it's all very well being able to cut open the weaker sides in the league that are maybe not as defensively assured and able to deal with this kind of opportunistic way of trying to create by, going forward early. But then actually against the better organised sides, being a little bit running out of ideas a little bit or kind of going forward so early as to be a little bit wasteful and not being able to catch the better organised sides. So I sort of have two different perspectives on Bristol Rovers and I don't quite know what to think, and I'm wondering where you sit as a fan.
None of us know what to think, Gab, honestly. We're just as I was saying earlier, we're a strange side that I don't think, what are we now, 3-4 months into the season? I still don't think any of us really know what our identity is as a team. It's actually one of the main talking points that we came away with from the Crawley game is that, okay, Crawley obviously aren't doing great, but they've got such a clear identity. You know exactly what sort of side they are. They know exactly what sort of side they are. You know how they're going to play in every game. It might not always get results, but you know that every single player on that pitch is they're all on the same page as to how they're going to play and pulling in the same direction, and they're going to play out from the back and have these little neat triangles in midfield and what have you. Whereas with us, we don't know what sort of side we are. Sometimes we are kind of a counter-attacking side, but we're not that great at that. We often do go long ball. I think in terms of possession, we're in the bottom 4 in League One. So
it's not, I don't know that I associate you with being like a long ball side per se, but very much in the case of, when you do get into the opposition half, it's what's the next through ball? What's the next through ball? How can we cut this opponent, open straight away? And I think that can have reward, but it can also be quite wasteful sometimes as well.
Yeah, of our 5 wins this season, 3 of them have come against the bottom 3 sides. One of them is against Northampton, who are a few places below us, and the other one was against Charlton, who are, I think, 1 place above us.
Yeah.
So we already feel like we're very much in this kind of mini league of about 8 teams at the bottom of League One. And I would say at the minute, we're just kind of doing the bare minimum to just beat the sides that we need to beat to not be dragged into the bottom 4. But really, whenever we come up against anyone of a decent caliber, as well as Wigan, but whenever we come up against anyone of a decent caliber, like Barnsley, Peterborough, Stockport, the scoreline doesn't always reflect it, but we largely get outclassed by those sides pretty comfortably and don't really lay a glove on them. So I think we can already see that we're quite comfortably below the probably top 10, 12-ish sides. And the ones in the bottom 8, sometimes I think because they're obviously naturally a bit weaker defensively than the teams near the top, sometimes our kind of chaos play and, like you said, looking for the early through ball and what have you, we can cut through some of the sides down near the bottom like that. Cambridge in particular, the goals we scored against them were just a joke. I think they have improved since we played them, to be fair, but we can sort of scrape by against those sides. But whenever we come up against a decent top 8, 10 organised, defensively solid side, we are really struggling. Very, very frustrating and mixed bag team this season.
Mixed bag for Bristol Rovers. Ollie, thanks so much for joining us this evening, and look forward to catching up with you later in the campaign.
Thanks for having me.
See you
Top
later.
man.
Cheers.
Delighted to be joined now by Rob Walker, who's a Blackpool fan. How are you, Rob?
Hi, Gab. Yeah, good. Thanks yourself.
Yeah, really well. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We don't have an awful lot of time left, so I'm just wondering, what will be the most sort of succinct way to sum up Blackpool's struggles this season for you?
That's a tough question. I think the problem we're finding at the moment is that we've got a lot of injuries, which I know a lot of sides have. But I think we obviously built a team in the summer for Neil Critchley's 3-5-2. Critchley lasted 2 games, and now we're stuck with players that obviously aren't suited to Steve Bruce's system of 4-4-2. So we've had quite a few injuries of late, which has just absolutely wrecked our any sort of flow we have in those first 4 or 5 games that we won. So confidence seems to be at a low ebb. I think if that match on Saturday was still being played now, it'd still be 0-0. It was 2 really poor League One teams. So and on paper, Blackpool, should be beating Northampton at home, with all due respect to Northampton. So it's not looking great at the moment. I think after the first 4 or 5 games, when we were all positive, we had a sort of a set 11. It only takes sort of 3 or 4 injuries to that starting 11 to realise that we probably haven't got the depth in the areas that we need to play a 4-4-2. So yeah, I think Blackpool as a club at the moment is lacking a bit of direction. I think there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes as well at the club, which is unsettling everybody. So yeah, interesting times. I think we need to try and get to January. Hopefully we're above that bottom 4, and Steve Bruce can bring some of his own players in, and hopefully we can steer clear of any trouble. But at the moment, it's we've certainly got one eye over our shoulder.
Certainly have. That makes a lot of sense, the recruitment for 3-5-2 and then the new manager likes 4-4-2, because your right centre-back, who's played the last 2 games, I've watched the extended highlights of both of them away at Leyton Orient, and the other one you played home to Northampton last week, and he looks like very much a specialist outside centre-half that's playing in a 4-4-2, because he's constantly pushing up the pitch, whether in possession or out possession, caused all sorts of problems against Leyton Orient, especially a striker like Dan Ajayi that we were talking about earlier. And it kind of shows like it's a club that doesn't write exactly what you're saying, the lack of alignment, the lack of vision, recruiting to a strategy and sticking to it. It feels like that situation with the centre half that I mentioned there, whose name escapes me. It feels like that kind of sums it up at the moment.
I assume you mean it's O'Fire, who's on loan from
yes, exactly. Yes, that's the one. O'Fire. Yeah.
O'Fire. Yeah, he's probably been one of our best players this season. But I think what's not helped is we've got 2 attacking fullbacks in Jordan Gabriel and Hayden Coulson, who both like to get forward. And I think we're probably being found out a little bit. I think it's not helped with injuries to Ollie Norburn and Albie Morgan. So I think that protection in midfield is probably not there. I think it was probably Lee Evans' poorest game for us on Saturday, but I think that's probably due to the fact that he's got no settled midfield partner. Ryan Finnegan came into the team on Saturday and he did okay, but apart from his wonder goal against Harrogate in the EFL Cup, he's not really had a run in the side or shown that much at the moment. So yeah, I do feel a bit for O'Fire. I think probably with the way we're set up, I think 2 attacking fullbacks, then sometimes you can get found out. But no, he's certainly been one of our sort of shining lights. And obviously a clean sheet on Saturday for the first time in a long time is a bonus. But going forward is a massive concern. I think we finished Saturday's game with a 17-year-old rookie up front on his own because players were taken off injured or missed a game altogether. So we need to rectify that quite quickly.
Hopefully you can do that. Listen, we've just about run out of time. Charlie, thanks so much for co-hosting with me this evening. It's been great to have you on for your insights on Wigan Athletic and some thoughts on League One as a whole. Rob, thanks so much for jumping on for your perspective on Blackpool. Thanks to all our guests. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate League One podcast. Get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify, because that would help us out an awful lot. And we'll see you again next week.